The time is just gone, 19 minutes past 9, as we continue with the broadcast this morning, right here on Salam Media. We are in the company of our Salam Media listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media, also One Nation, 88.9 FM out of Polokwane. Now, this is an issue that we obviously needed to discuss, and we're talking about the hypocrisy, and this comes against the background of the Russian athlete Alexandra Morozova, who received a letter from the Comrades Marathon Association, and that was prior to the Comrades Marathon, where her number and her entry was withdrawn. And this is obviously as a result of global dynamics that are playing out, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which was a reason that was given. The matter went to court, and she was then allowed to participate. But the quick question here is, where do we draw the line, particularly when we are talking about cultural boycotts, we're talking about sporting boycotts, and we see a lot of that taking place right across the entire world. Looking at Africa, for instance, Morocco and its occupation of the Western Sahara, yet we've seen Moroccan athletes that were allowed to compete. We see what Israel has been doing to Palestine for well over 70 years, yet Israeli athletes were allowed to participate. And also looking at other governing bodies right across the entire world. FIFA, a classic example where Israel is allowed to compete as a European nation. And to take this discussion further, we've got a panel of Donovan Williams and EFF MP Nazir Paulsen. Donovan, I see you on screen already. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, Inayet. Morning, Nazir.
Good
Nazir,
morning,
assalamu alaikum to
Donovan.
you and welcome to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and the listeners. Good morning to you, Donovan. Jummah Mubarak to everyone.
Yes, Donovan, let's just start off with you. And obviously, I'm talking about the hypocrisy. And I think, where does one actually draw the line when it comes to issues like this? Now, this was just one example in the Comrades, but I cited other examples, as far as FIFA. And we know in South Africa as well, we are talking about intellectual, we talk about cultural boycotts, universities, and the like. In a situation like this, where do we draw the line?
Well, the question we'd ask, I guess, and I think Nazir would smile when I say, is there a line? Or is it you draw lines as you go along? Look, I think hypocrisy is a good description, but it depends if it's in your interests or not. Let's begin here. In the case of the Comrades Marathon Association, they made it seem like it's not them. It's not the association. It's not ASA. It's the world body that said, look, we're telling you can't have this Russian athlete because we have taken a stance. But when you dug a little deeper, you found that the world body was just suggesting and recommending, and also was then saying that no, the athlete can compete, but you can't compete for money. So you can't be an elite athlete. You have to go and run with the, when you start off, you start off with the back with all the others. And if you did well, you won't win any money. And that's the case she actually won. But for South Africans, we know the importance of cultural and sporting boycotts. So we do not take the hard and fast rule, that's Black South Africans in particular, of no politics in sports. It helped us. We know individuals in our communities who went to go and play so-called white sports, we ostracized them. We come from a background and an understanding of no normal sport in an abnormal society. That's us. That's across the board. Whereas white society in South Africa come from the opposite. They didn't mind politics in sports when it just elevated themselves. But when you had a cultural and sporting boycott that took place in the 70s, that started in the 70s with the Basil de Oliveira affair, they then began the mantra, no politics in sport, no politics in sport, which now has become a refrain. But now today, in this world, not just today, one of the hypocrisies is of the international system, because sport is international. You're talking about international bodies. There's no boycott or whatever without internationally happening. One of the hypocrisies of the international system is that the international system is based on a fundamental law that every country or nation is sovereign. So every country is sovereign. That means they are law unto themselves, and therefore they're all equal. But the hypocrisy is that's not true. You look at in all our international bodies, there's special favor and more power for particular countries. The United Nations is the easiest with the Security Council, where you have a veto for the United States, China, Russia, the UK, and France, those five countries. So, so the hypocrisy is it is not equal, but you act like it's equal. All right, that's the first. The second part is, and I'm sorry I'm being so long, but I want to contextualize in it. The second part is that our sporting bodies, we have given sport away to them. We found that out with the 2010 World Cup, that football is actually owned by FIFA. So regardless of the community and our people investing in football over time, all over the world, and not just in South Africa, FIFA operates like it owns football itself, and they make the rules. So if they decide that as a government you're interfering in football, they can ostracize you, they can remove you. And our associations, our sporting bodies, like the Comrades Association, the hypocrisy is they hide behind these bodies. They hide behind them all the time. Now, not just sporting bodies, we do want a situation where, yes, the state is in charge of who we support and who we don't, how we operate at an international level, but there must be space for society. So therefore, the University of Johannesburg, even though we don't have a boycott against Israel, can make a decision and say, we don't want Israeli academics. It's okay. And whereas we can disagree with the Comrades Marathon Association, which didn't even have the bravery or the honesty to say we don't want a Russian athlete, and stood and hid behind the world body, right, together with the Athletics South Africa, hid behind the world body, we can say, no, you're not going to do that to Russian athletes. We don't see any reason for it. So yeah, so I want to put that into that context so that we understand that, look, these matters require society to speak up and not leave the lines to be drawn by anybody else. Thanks, Inayet. I hope I managed to introduce the topic a little bit
Well,
more.
you certainly did, and you have done extremely well. And I think you've given us a lot more to actually talk about and to think about. And I'm sure Nazir as well, as we are listening to Donovan and what Donovan mentioned, that there is something fundamentally wrong with the system. And that is the reason why we see the type of hypocritic behavior on the part of organizations like the Comrades Marathon Association. And I cited the examples, selective, where on the one hand, because of Russia and Ukraine, you don't want to allow this athlete. Yet, when you look at what's happening with Morocco, as I mentioned, Israel, a classic example, Nazir.
Shukran so much, Inayet, and yes, Donovan, thank you very much. It's you started off very clearly, and you elucidated even more as you went along. And you're correct, there isn't a line, and we have to ask ourselves, why isn't there a line? Now, there was a resolution condemning the atrocities of Morocco and Israel against Western Sahara and Palestine, respectively. And when at the time when Cyril Ramaphosa was chairperson of the AU, he did nothing to condemn those atrocities. And neither did he condemn anything about Uganda. And there's a reason why. In Uganda, his family has personal business interests. So when it comes to that line gets shifted as and when it suits the head of state. We know this ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa is at sixes and sevens when it comes to most things. So there isn't really a line that is applied consistently, and that is sad. And this is why the Russian athlete was a victim of that inconsistency, whereas we would at times, play to the tune of the West, and there are times where we, as well as what the West does, despite the United Nations resolution, nobody is really condemning and boycotting Morocco or Israel, not even South Africa. South Africa has been speaking about downgrading its diplomatic relationship with Israel, but hasn't done so yet. So it is sad, and as Donovan has correctly said, for those who have served under sport under the old SACOS banner, there's a more consistent approach to what should happen as far as sport and cultural exchanges are concerned. But under the current ANC, one questions where their loyalties were during the times of apartheid, because right now they are supporting pariah states of Morocco and Israel. Thank you very much, Inayet.
Yes. Now, Donovan, this is also an issue when we look at how these instruments of culture or sport and how they actually play into geopolitics. And for me, this is extremely important because this is where the dangers lie. Because on the one hand, we're talking about democracy, we're talking about liberal, we're talking about neoliberal. Yet we know that many of these governments that we are talking are actually fascist in nature. And this is now a virus that is actually affecting sports and culture right throughout the entire world.
Look, I think it's correct that you describe it as geopolitics, and geopolitics is a fascinating term. It's about power, right? And sometimes something is wrong, immoral, unjust, incorrect. But when you don't have the power, you have to tolerate it while still, on principle, disagree with it. So, for example, the classic example which I used just now to illustrate is that the United Nations, the only decisions of the United Nations that are really enforceable are decisions made by the Security Council. So you can have the General Assembly pass resolution upon resolution about countries like Israel or whomsoever, right? And it doesn't need to be enforced. But yet all of us, all countries, are members of the United Nations. What would it help if South Africa withdrew from the United Nations? Would it help anything? So there's a level of understanding that you have to understand that you may not agree with the United Nations and how it is structured and so forth, but you have to participate in it. So it is easy to rule by decree, but do you have real change? So you can make a statement and say, this is hypocrisy, we don't want to participate. The Western countries have done a lot more worse to the world than Israel and Morocco collectively. So shouldn't we boycott them? Shouldn't we have a cultural and sanctions against the United States? So this is why there has to be consistency, because we don't want geopolitics to be used as a political football in our party politics. What we require, and this is why when one talked about the line being drawn, who draws the line, not just where is it drawn? It requires, and this is for all our change, and I think I'm a stuck record on this, Inayet, I've been on the show many times. It requires not party politics, it requires not politicians, it requires people. Civil society, not just organized, but people. People generally can say, and as bad as our courts are, they tend to reflect people's will, right? That no, Comrades Marathon Association and Athletics South Africa, you can't ban the Russian elite athlete. You're not going to do that. At the same time, say, no, UJ, you are correct. You don't need to use, you don't, if you want to make a decision that you do not want Israeli academics, that's in order. Because people are making their voices known. So in our world where neoliberal powers are effectively the dominant powers, and those who are supposedly on the other side, be it China or Russia, etc., right, are not necessarily socialist countries that believe that they're fighting neoliberalism. No, they're making certain that trade and their influence is secure for their countries itself. So yes, Russia and China may be better friends to South Africa and other countries within the South, but they are not us, and they never will be. So this adage of your enemy's enemy is your friend is not true. Your friend is your friend. There's no enemy's enemy is your friend. So when we look at this matter of geopolitics, you've got to look at it in that way. You've got to look at it in a way that says to you, okay, we do not want to we want to support Western Sahara from Moroccan dominance. So therefore, we want to expose Spain. We want to expose the United States. We want to expose France in that regard. It's not just stopping at Morocco and Western Sahara. But for us to do that, as a people, we've got to elevate it. And we do not need to depend on political parties, parliament, etc. Because they've shown as political parties that their interests really are internal interests. We've seen it too many times in too many elections that they go into discussions and coalitions. They say they support Israel, but they would go into a coalition with a party that is openly, brazenly supporting Israel. All right. So all of those things are put aside. They then can barter and trade matters. So I don't want to move the discussion into party politics because that doesn't help us. The matter is geopolitics requires people to be heard, not necessarily politicians, to force politicians to hear people through whichever instruments.
Donovan and Nazir, we're going to put you on hold. We're just going to go quickly. We're going to take a few ads and we'll be back.
Something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
The Syrian crisis has raged for over 4,000 days. 4,000 days of suffering, displacement, hunger, and intolerable insecurity. With your help, Islamic Relief can continue to stand alongside them. Never has your support been so important. Together, we can stand with the Syrian people. We can help them build a better future. Will you continue to stand with the people of Syria? Please, donate now.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world, where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
One small gesture can change someone's life. The SANZAF Meals Distribution Project aims to reach out to 100,000 individuals each month with freshly prepared meals daily. With your assistance, we can make this possible by contributing just 12 Rand per meal. Call us on 011 834 6046 for more information. SANZAF, changing lives through development and relief.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
At 9:37 a.m., we continue with our discussion this morning in the company of Donovan Williams and Nazir Paulsen. We are talking about the hypocrisy in the aftermath of the Comrades Marathon. And obviously, we are looking at the link between global political agendas playing out and when it comes to sports and culture. Nazir, just to continue, and Donovan articulated a number of issues. And I don't think, party politics obviously is one issue, but looking at yourself perhaps in government, and we know that fundamentally there is something definitely wrong with the systems within which all these organizations like the United Nations, like organizations like FIFA, and all of them operate. And looking at government and you being in government, where does government's responsibility actually lie when it comes to matters, when we see that there is open hypocrisy, and also, within the countries that they actually govern? And we're not talking about South Africa in particular. It could be anywhere else right across the world.
Shukran so much, Brother Inayet. Yes, I agree with Donovan. It does take people, and as a politician, I believe that political parties have a greater role to play in society other than Um, the EFF not yet in government. We will be 2024. We've got a few more months to go. So I think what the ANC government has succeeded is to dupe us with Rainbow Nation fairy dust, and underneath it practice all the hypocrisy. So I think we need a government that is consistent in applying its own policies and actually applying its policies. The ANC has got a policy on Palestine and Western Sahara, but has not given effect to those policies at all. And Cyril Ramaphosa had an opportunity when he was chairperson of the AU to take a position on Western Sahara, to take a position on Uganda, and has not done so, to implement its own policy there and to give guidance at the AU, but he hasn't done so. So I think South Africans are now slowly but surely wiping the Rainbow Nation fairy dust from their eyes and realizing that we are going nowhere with an ANC government. We'll have rules applied haphazardly and leave the country in confusion. But wait, what is our position on Russia? What is our position? Why are we not? Do we not serve in BRICS together along with Russia? Is that not a better platform to go and discuss issues? Why should we allow a World Athletics body to dictate to South Africa as to what it should do when we have access to the Russian government via BRICS and have a policy on Russia and say, make it categorically clear to the rest of the world that Russia is considered an ally of South Africa? But yet we play both sides. On the one hand, we serve in BRICS together. On the other hand, we ban a Russian athlete based on a recommendation from a World Athletics body. A recommendation is what it took for us to go and ban. And thankfully, the High Court in Pretoria showed wisdom in saying that this is not that we're doing an injustice to the Russian athlete.
Yes, Nazir. And also, Donovan, I think, what is very important to understand in the context of what we are discussing is we know for the fact that, governments will not take a position. They will not take a stance on this issue. And again, it's coming back to the point that you make. It's going to take people, it's going to take civil society, it's going to take even the mainstream media normally, would not obviously take this matter, the way alternative media or other forms of media. And this is why we're saying that, move away from the mainstream, move away from governments, because they're not going to do anything. And it's going to take people like yourselves, like us, that need to obviously take this issue up.
Look, Inayet, I want to agree with Nazir that politicians and government are not just like necessary evils. No, they are necessary. That we fight for democracy. We want democratic governments. We want politicians in democratic institutions, etc. The matter I'm raising is to understand the limitations of those self-same institutions, be it at international level or national level or local levels. So therefore, you can't expect those institutions to struggle on your behalf. And we have precedents in history. There's been one international cultural boycott, sporting boycott, and that was the boycott against apartheid South Africa. Right? That was, so you had individual countries, particularly in the 80s when the Cold War was heavy. You would have the Americans decide not to go to the 1980 Russian Olympics, Moscow Olympics, sorry. And in 1984, the Russians, the Soviet Union, and did not go to the Los Angeles Olympics. Right? So you've had instances like that. But where there was an international boycott, it was against apartheid South Africa. Since then, there has not been another. So wherever there have been problems in particular countries, be it Zimbabwe, right, be it Sri Lanka, Israel, Western Sahara, Morocco, there hasn't been enough support for an international boycott of those countries. So those institutions, you can be the chair of that institution, you can't decide for that institution, right? The Pan-African Parliament cannot. And for ourselves as South Africa, if you can recall, we opposed the re-inclusion of Morocco into the African Union. We opposed it right until the end. There was enough countries who did not agree. There's a growing number of African countries that have open relations with Israel, within the Southern African region for that matter, right? So we must also understand our own limitations in those institutions. But more than that is that the example of the anti-apartheid movement and how it got a boycott was not through governments. Ronald Reagan did not really do sanctions until the last moment. Margaret Thatcher did not do sanctions until the last moment. However, in their countries, people, through the Black caucuses and so forth, people did not buy South African goods. So you watched the Cosby Show and you saw a poster against apartheid on the wall of Theo, his son's room, right? In other words, you watch sitcoms in the mainstream. It was normal not to support South Africa. Hollywood would not. The British, I can't recall the acting association there right now, right? Did not. So what you did was, despite their governments, the Dutch ambassador, former Dutch ambassador, when she was speaking the one time, she indicated how she got involved in the anti-apartheid movement. She was shopping with her kid, and she wanted to buy South African oranges or something like that. And a child said to her, "Mommy, we're not supposed to buy South African oranges." She said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, we were taught about it in school. South Africa is doing bad things." And that wasn't a Dutch government decision. And so therefore, we mustn't take shortcuts on this matter. We must support our governments. We must believe in them, believe in politicians and what they're supposed to do, but understand their limitations and understand that it doesn't fall away from us. So the Comrades Marathon Association needs to take a wake up. They cannot make decisions because they made that decision, not the World Athletics Association. The World Athletics Association used their weakness and their hopes to curry favor with them. They manipulated that, they exploited that. But our athletics, South Africa, together with the Comrades Association, made that decision. And as people, we must take them to task, right? Not necessarily just our government, as people. We need to raise it in the sports. Now, this is where governments come in. This is where Parliament comes in. Needs to call ASA and the Comrades Marathon Association in and ask them. Because what's the use putting it on BRICS for? What do you think Russia is going to say? People will say, yeah, you're going to expect that. That's not the point. The matter is about changing, having hegemony on opinions in particular matters within society. So let the Portfolio Committee call in the ASA and the Comrades Marathon Association and wrap them over the knuckles for making a decision that was wholly unjust. That's how you do it. That's how you create the line in society. And it's about where's the line, because we need to write the line each time because we don't have the power. The power lies elsewhere, and you've got to put pressure on those who have power.
Well, thank you for that, Donovan. And unfortunately, time is of the essence, and we are running very fast out of time. Nazir, final thoughts from you?
Thank you very much, Brother Inayet. Yes, I think political parties have a great role to play, especially in South Africa. Remember, we still wield a lot of influence, and I think it's very important for political parties to engage all of civil society on issues that affect not just South Africans, but the world at large. And I think there's a strong enough position on the issues relating to Israel and Western Sahara, or Israel and Morocco, with regards to Palestine and Western Sahara. And the South African government has been tone deaf to the people of this country. They have shown no interest in what is the will of the people, but rather what serves their interest best. And I think it's very important that South Africa wakes up to the realities that the current government is always going to be leaving us in a state of confusion, whereas uh, their own members would march against its relationship with apartheid Israel, and yet it is still one of our biggest trade partners, and we still have full diplomatic and trade relations with apartheid Israel. There is no clear, or there's no implementation of its own resolutions on the Western Sahara issue. So I think, it cannot be left to just civil society to tell government what to do, but also for government to respond to the will of its people. It is that same people that has brought about the end of an apartheid government, and it is that same people that will now have to make sure that it replaces the current South African government with a government that is more responsive to the will of its people.
Well, Nazir and Donovan, I think both of you, unfortunately, time has run out, but we do appreciate both of you taking time out and being part of this discussion this morning right here on Salam Media. All the best to both of you.
Thank
Shukran
you,
so
thank
much.
you, thank you for your, thank you, Nazir, as well.
Thank you, Donovan. It's wonderful being on the show with you.
Okay, cool, man. Cheers.
Donovan Williams and Nazir Paulsen with us. And with that, we're going to go for a break. We come back. We've got another double coming up, and this is unpacking Nadima Noor, director of the Dream Act Foundation, Afghanistan, her coming tour to South Africa. We're going to be in the company of our very own Apa Mariam Mia and Hawa Patel.